Okay, so we have a quorum, everybody, and
Okay.
we're recording. John? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, Dave.
Okay. Okay. Showtime. Showtime, she says. Come on now.
Peggy, what's the holdup? Are you okay,
What-
Peggy?
Yeah, I'm fine. So
What- what-
we're recording and here's the agenda.
Okay,
Here we go.
very good. I
All right.
understand from Peggy that we have a quorum. Right? We have a
I'm
quorum.
sorry, real quick. I'm sorry, Scott. Peggy, you're not sharing your screen, so they don't, we can't see it.
You gotta share on Teams.
I am. Oh. No, wait, that would have been,
I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and share from my side.
sorry, I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Oh, Jesus. Maybe you shouldn't have. I'm being spazzy like usual. There it is. Can you see it now?
No,
Can you
we
also-
just see the whiteboard, like you've shared the whiteboard on Teams.
How do you get off that? How do you get off it? Oh my God. Yes, please.
So let's go to your team.
In the team,
This is the meeting,
right?
and you pulled up, it's this thing called whiteboard. And I
There
looked
we
at,
go.
Someone else did it. Thank you, whoever did that.
Oh, and
Okay.
that might have.
Yeah.
She was, okay,
Okay.
we'll give Heather credit too.
Yes, thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
quick learning.
All right.
Very good. We have quorum and we have an agenda on the screen. It is November 7th. We are in Alpine, Texas. Beautiful weather in Alpine. 20 degrees warmer in Alpine than it is in El Paso. We've kind of done the weather forecast, and Jennifer has the most snowy conditions of anybody. 8 inches of snow where she lives. So very good. Great to be here in Alpine. We got a nice, big, comfortable room. And I thought we'd have everybody in the room here with me introduce themselves. I'm Scott Reinert, Chair of the Region E Planning Group.
I'm Heather Rose with the Texas Water Development Board.
Dave Hall, a board member from the public.
Sean Woodard, board member for industry.
John Kennedy, Presidio Municipal Development District for Rural Economic Development. Jay Ornelas, member for Water District.
Tim Leary, member, Marathon.
Aaron Burstiaga, Rio Grande Council of Governments.
Very good. Thank you. Those online, we'll start with Jennifer. That's who I see up in the top. Go ahead.
Okay, Jennifer Jackson, technical consultant with Carollo Engineering.
I see
Hi,
some-
Teresa Todd. I'm with counties in Jeff Davis County, but I'm in El Paso today, where it is cooler
Yes.
and raining.
Wow. It's beautiful here. Sunny, warm. Okay.
Right here tonight.
Okay, Summer?
Hi, Summer Webb. I'm at an airport.
Oh, wow, okay. Good, interesting meeting, okay. I see John.
Yeah, this is John Albright with Freeze and Nichols Technical Consultant.
And an AG has to be Annette Gutierrez.
Yes, hi guys, it's me. I had a dog emergency, so I'm working out of the house because I have an escape artist. Thank you.
Okay. And next to Annette, I'm not sure who that is, but go ahead. PC.
I'll go ahead and mention, so we've got, we also have Crystal Williams, Daniel Fagan, Becky Gates, and are you all from Freeze and Nichols or in Carollo?
Oh, yeah.
Is that Yes, okay, so that we got that. And then on our next screen, Alderman Block, you want to say hello?
In between this.
Hello, I'm a Black, sitting from Elisario.
Let me get.
Thank you. Omar? You're muted. Okay, so you're having some difficulty with your audio, but hopefully it'll come back. Arlena?
Arlena Palacios, I'm a member. I represent the public.
Thank you. Becky Brewster?
Becky Brewster from Van Horn, representing municipalities.
Mr. Dunlap?
I'm here in Marfa, and I represent the business community here.
Thank you. Mr. Grijalva?
Jerry Grijalva, Lower Valley Water District in Texas.
Thank you. And Mr. Melendez, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm so sorry, Mr. Melendez. We don't have your audio, so if you want to just put it in the chat, that'd be great. Mr. Fernandez?
Good morning, everyone. This is Juan Fernandez. I'm here in El Paso with Bureau of Reclamation.
Great, thank you so much. And Randy, I see parts of you. Are you going to make your way back?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
That's Randy.
I'm working on this system.
Well, we can see the picture if you just want to get behind.
I'm here, and that's all you're going to see.
Well, we do want to see your face, so that'd be great if you can just. There
Okay,
you go,
there you
right
go.
there. There you are. That is you. Just get in front of those paintings, and you're good to go. Okay, so we've got Mr. Nash. Okay, we'll come back to Mr. Nash. And I see. Okay, thank you. David Etzold.
Good morning, David Etzold, El Paso, representing real estate.
Thank you. And then Jose, I don't know if you are available right now, if you want to. There you are.
Yeah, hi. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jose Landeros with El Paso County representing tourism.
Thank you so much. And then, so that'll wrap it up, Chairman Reinhardt. So if you'd like to move on to the.
Okay, we're here for item 2, public comment. Okay, hearing none, we'll go to item 3, recognition of guests and designated alternates. I think we kind of went through all the attendees, so we're on item 4, review and approve the minutes for the general meeting held on October 15th, 2024.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so we had a first, I'm not sure who the first was, but we have a second with David Etzold.
Thomas Black.
Thank you, Alderman Black.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, item 5. Texas Water Development Board General Updates by Heather Rose.
I'm gonna pull my slides up, thanks.
Oh, someone's on it. That wasn't me.
Hi, all. So just a couple quick updates. Next slide, please. So just to give you all a reminder of where we are in the planning cycle. We are zooming right through, and we're going to be talking a lot about your initially parent plan, or IPP for short. That's due to the board on March 3rd, 2025. And then your next big deadline will be October 20th. The next couple of slides are going to be going over some milestones in between those two dates. Can everyone hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear. Okay. Cool.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
I can't do it from this.
So we recently sent out to your chairs and consultants these additional resources. If y'all could please mute so everyone can hear, appreciate that. Thanks. So we sent a process schematic of what
I'm
to
gonna turn mine. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see once you turn yours off if it.
Yeah, let me turn mine on to make sure.
Yeah, it may pop up then.
All right. If y'all could please mute.
Thank
you. So we sent out this process schematic to kind of help visualize what the requirements are in the next couple months. We also sent out a checklist of what's required for public notice and then a IPP review checklist. I'm going to be going over those now. Next slide, please.
I can't do it from here. Thanks.
So here's a graphic of what to expect in the next couple of months. So soon y'all will be adopting your initially prepared plan, and these two, the top row is happening simultaneously as the bottom row. Everything in orange is what the Regional Water Planning Group needs to do, and then at the top it's kind of happening parallel at the same time. So while y'all submit your plan to us, we'll be reviewing it. And then we have when I say we, the Texas Water Development Board has 120 days for comments. And then also a couple other agencies, specifically TCQ and Parks, will be having comments also. Meanwhile, your 30-day notice for your hearing on the IPP will go out and your public comment period will open. And then you'll be delivering copies of your plan to public locations or if that public location, such as a library or a county courthouse, is able to have a publicly accessible computer, you can just send them a digital link. We'll be working with Annette and Peggy on how to make that happen, but just letting you know that's maybe they might want to help coordinate with y'all throughout the region to help with getting those copies of the plan either digitally or hard copies in places in each county in the region. And then y'all will hold your hearing sometime in the spring or the summer, and you'll address your comments that you received in that 30-day notice period at that hearing. And then after the hearing, you'll have a written public comment, and that's when the agency public comment period happens for 60 days. And y'all kind of at the end of this graphic in blue, y'all will address all of the comments you receive on your plan from both the agencies and from the public. Oh, Annette, can you go back to the...
Sorry, she's telling me to join the meeting.
So the public gets an opportunity to review the IPP, but not the plan afterward.
Pretty much, yeah, because the plan, this is the initially prepared plan, and it's kind of the idea is that there's kind of a working draft, and the public gets to have their input on the draft.
During the working draft.
Yeah, and then you'll consider that input, and then turn in your final plan in October. I think I was on slide 4.
Yeah, I thought you wanted me to go back, Heather. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Okay. So then y'all will adopt your plan sometime this fall, and you will submit it to us by October 20th, 2025, which will be here before we know it. Any questions on the schematic before moving on? All right, next slide, please. So this is just a checklist of what's required for public noticing. It can get really confusing because different items have different requirements for public notice. And this is really to help out Rio Grande Council of Governments with but this is available to y'all. And then next slide. And then finally, we've also sent out this giant checklist of everything that's required to be in your plan, and it's my job to make sure that I look through every single item on this checklist and make sure that the plan somehow meets these criteria. but that's available to your consultant now, and we're already working together on that. And that's it for me. Any questions? Go to the last slide, which has my email. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. But any questions now? All right, thanks, y'all.
Okay. We are on item 6, report from Carollo on the schedule of regional water planning.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just get set up and start sharing my screen, and we will get going on today's agenda.
And Jennifer, as you're preparing that, it looks
Sure.
like you will have the screen up until the 14th. So I think if it's okay,
Oh.
you're gonna Jennifer will be managing the screen because all of the handouts are from her. Is that correct, Jennifer? Is that correct way to be looking at it?
Yes, that's fine. So I had planned to pause for Dr. Fullerton. Is he not coming in on that agenda item?
Oh, no, he will be coming
Okay.
in, but I'm just saying that way we don't have to worry about the back and forth. You'll be
Perfect.
running the screen until then.
Okay, so if I'm going to do that, you guys just holler at me if there's questions online or there in person, because I've got too many monitors to try to keep track of. Okay, so can everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So just as a reminder, we met last month. We've kind of had this monthly cadence so that we can meet that March 3rd deadline with our completed IPP. We've agreed to take the month of December off, but last month we did approve our kind of draft chapters that'll go into that IPP, chapters 1, 3, and 4, with the flexibility to kind of make some modifications as needed if I'm working with the WUGS or the Water Development Board. And then we also reviewed our draft chapters 7, 9, and 10. So we're making good headway with the amount of material that we're completing as we walk towards that March 3rd deadline. We also discussed this idea of using a management supply factor, and I went through some slides that kind of explained what that tool is used for. It's a tool that can be used for planning for uncertainty, and we're going to go back and kind of touch on that again today. And then we just talked about additional planning efforts that were being done behind the scene in addition to what was presented at that meeting. Today, we're going to circle back on this population projection comparison between Dr. Fullerton's Excel file and that of the projections in our 2026 plan. We're going to address this management supply factor. One of the items I took away from last month's meeting was if we use this tool to kind of create a water supply buffer for each WUG and wholesale water provider, what would those proposed management supply factors be? So I did that calculation, provided a table in one of your handouts, so we'll review that together. And then we're going to look at and hopefully approve today our IPP chapters 9 and 10. We're going to circle back to our draft chapters 2 and 7. They were kind of impacted a bit by having this second opinion around our population projections, and there was some additional content that needed to be built into both of those chapters. So we're just going to circle back on those new enhanced pieces. And then we're going to review our draft chapter 8. So a lot of material to cover. In addition to what Carollo will be presenting, I also have Frieza Nichols here today, who's going to share a few slides on the work that they've been involved in as a support to Carollo, where it comes to these water management strategies and kind of following up on a survey process and reaching out to our water user groups by placing phone calls and just connecting with individuals so that we can glean the details that we need in order to update those water management strategies, which is Chapter 5. So a lot of good material to cover today. As Heather mentioned, we're on pace with our scope of work. And this is, obviously where the planning gets intense with the amount of work that needs to be accomplished before that IPP deliverable in March. Okay, I think that takes us, Mr. Chairman, to Agenda 7.
Okay. Item number 7, consider, discuss, and review the Texas Water Development Board approved population projections in comparison to the draft UTEP population projections.
Okay, so in your books, if you're there in person or if you're following along with the agenda online, I believe this is handout 1, and then we'll also discuss handout 2 as part of this agenda item. But first, I just want to start by thanking Dr. Fullerton. I don't know if he's on the call today now. I know he'll be joining us a little bit later. And so I'm looking forward to his presentation and learning, more about his methodology and his approach to his calculations. Without knowing what that is right now, I simply just took his Excel sheet and I graphed the totals for the region throughout the planning horizon. So in orange on your handout 1, or if you're looking at the screen, those bars represent the region total population projections from Dr. Fullerton's Excel file for the planning decades of 2030 all the way through 2080. In blue, I have graphed our approved 2026 Regional Water Plan population projections that include all those revision requests that we had submitted to the Water Development Board that got blessed by them. And so those are the blue bars running from 2030 to 2080. Simply put, you can see that our Regional Water Plan population projections are slightly higher in count in the decades of 2030, 2040, and 2050. And then in the decades that are much further out in our planning horizon, 2060, 2070, and 2080, Dr. Fullerton's data becomes a little bit higher in those counts for those decades that are much later on in our planning horizon. So I'm not going to draw any conclusions until after we can hear from Dr. Fullerton how he made his approach and methodology was. But I just wanted to provide a preliminary analysis of what the two data sets look like when they are graphed together. One thing I'm going to put a plug in for is when we get to those decades that are kind of out in the future of our planning horizon, there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's the Water Development Board's projections plus the survey information that we collected or the approach that UTIP took. Those numbers are going to be more refined, as we continue to plan every 5 years. So I do recommend that we don't get too stuck on, the 2060, 2070, 2080 type data sets, because as we continue to plan, we're going to know a little bit more about what those projections ought to be. Regardless, you can see that there's uncertainty in our population projections. And I think that is why, I am leaning towards definitely utilizing that management supply factor tool that the regional water planning process allows us to use so that we can plan for these uncertainties and ensure that we've built up enough of a water buffer around our strategies to account for either the orange bar or the blue bar. Okay, so handout 2 is just a table, takes what was graphed, breaks it down by county throughout the planning horizon with this comparison between that UTIP, study and what is in our draft 2026 Regional Water Plan. So although by county there can be some variations, the totals at the bottom in bold font is what got graphed on the bar chart. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's any conversation need to be had at this time, if you want to save it for Dr. Fullerton's agenda item. So I'm going to pause since I can't really tell who's raising hands or what's going on there in the room before we move into agenda item 8.
I'll just make a comment. This is John Kennedy. Since I'm kind of new to this process, noticing that the rural counties and our projections are showing a decrease in population in the out years. So I'm just noticing that it's interesting. I'll look forward to discussing all that more.
Yes, and I will get to that as part of our Chapter 2 kind of review and update. We've included in our Chapter 2, which speaks in detail to population projection, water demand projections, about this growth that the region anticipates seeing. And if you recall, and I don't know, John, this may be before you joined, but we've included Dr. Fullerton's letter to the planning group about what those key economic growth scenarios are that are being, that will be anticipated to hit probably every county. We've included that information in our Chapter 2 just as a very detailed description of what's happening there, in the grassroots and what we anticipate coming, despite what, the projections may look like with the Water Development Board or, a separate study.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sure we're going to circle back to this later in our agenda, so I'll go ahead and move forward to agenda item 8, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Okay, item 8. Consider, discuss, and review the draft management strategy or management supply factors by WUG.
Okay, so I tried really hard to put this section together about as simple as I could so I didn't lose anybody along the way, but please shout out and let me know if something's unclear. But these are similar slides to what I presented in the meeting last month. Again, just as a reminder to those today, the purpose of this management supply factor is to address uncertainty in the planning and project implementation process. So as we're developing our water management strategies, the concept is we determine what that management supply factor should be, and then we build those water management strategies in such a way where they're bringing on additional supply that is going beyond just meeting the needs. And that buffer of water supply is kind of going to absorb this uncertainty in our projections, whether it's population or water demands. So this was presented last month as a great tool that I think we can use regardless of what studies have been done or what projection data sets we're using. It's just kind of bolstering up our regional water plan with the ability to kind of plan for these uncertainties and ensure that we've got water coming into our communities throughout the planning horizon that will, absorb the uncertainty around our population count. If you recall, this is a tool from the Water Development Board, and so that equation must be calculated here, displayed on the screen, where your management supply factor is basically the total volume of decadal existing water supplies plus the total volume of all the decadal recommended water management strategy supplies. So everything you have right now at your fingertips, plus everything you think you're going to get with your water management strategies, divided by that water demand by decade. So I'm going to break this down so it becomes a little more clear as to what I'm proposing. I took, for example, the Horizon Regional MUD entity. And if we look at this example, the equation at the end, step 4, says that their management supply factor is 2.3. Well, at first glance, what does 2.3 really mean? If we walk through that equation, what I'm showing is Right now in our plan for Horizon Regional Mud, they get water from Hueco Mistilla Bolson and the Rio Grande Alluvium aquifer. The total for those two sources is 6,406 acre feet a year. All the way throughout the planning horizon, it stays constant, it doesn't change. So what I'm doing is I'm going to plan in a very conservative way by using the largest volume for your VE and your VR and your D. And this is going to allow us to account for where in the planning horizon we have the greatest demand and will need the largest volume of existing supply plus your recommended strategy supply. So I've circled 6,406 because it doesn't change. That is our VE value. Then I looked at the volume of water that's coming in off of these water management strategies that we had in our previous plan. So that is table 5.2. Well, Horizon is implementing 3 different strategies: water loss audit and mainline repair, some conservation efforts through public education, and some additional wells and expansion of a desal plant. If these 3 strategies are summed in 2080, those 3 strategies are going to bring on an additional supply of 17,559 acre feet. So that is the largest amount seen inside our planning horizon. So I circle that one. That is our VR. Then to find the value D, which is the total identified decadal water demand volume, these water demands are sitting in our table 2.2 in our chapter 2. So I went back to that table for Horizon Regional Mud, and they are projected to experience the largest demand in 2080 at 10,376 acre feet. So plug and chug in the equation. You have your largest existing supply that you're grabbing right now, plus the largest amount of supply that's going to come on with your water management strategies, divided by the greatest decadal demand, and you get 2.3. So basically what this is saying is you have 2.3 times the water supply of your demand. So you can start to see that we've just built a buffer. And if we plan water management strategies in our 2026 plan for this volume, we will have not only met our needs if Horizon Regional Mud has a need, but we've got a surplus, a buffer of water supply that goes beyond just meeting those identified needs. Certainly, that surplus is going to take care of any uncertainties in our population data. One thing I want to note, if you're looking at handout 3, I'll flip over to that in my slide, is you'll see down here, Horizon Regional Mud 2.3. So this is the exercise and the calculation process that I took for every single WUG, whether it was municipal or non-municipal, and for all of our major water providers. These are the proposed management supply factors that I think we could plan towards that'll build in that buffer to account for the differences in our population data or the discrepancy that you think came with the population data originally from the Water Development Board, or the growth you think that's going to happen in the next 5 years, because obviously we're going to readdress this in the 7th cycle of planning where we can look at it once more and kind of fine tune that information. Scott, one thing I will call out is I know that we have had conversations with El Paso Water. You have historically always built in a buffer, whether you knew you were doing the management supply factor or not. And that additional 20,000 acre feet has been built in to your VR. So I summed everything that you said you wanted in the plan previously, and then I added 20,000 acre feet as your buffer. And so on that handout 3 for El Paso Water, when you look at that management supply factor, it has your 20,000 acre feet built into it So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. So,
Jennifer,
yep.
Dave Etzold here. Would you address for the rest of the members what you see as important in these MSFs that are 1 or less on your chart here?
Yes. So that is a great question. If your management supply factor is 1, basically what that's saying is the amount of volume, the total volume of water that you're getting off of your existing supply and your management strategies, your water management strategies to meet whatever demand, the greatest demand in your is a wash. You're going to meet it exactly. And so when it comes to the non-municipal, when we're looking at like manufacturing, mining, livestock irrigation, I'm not so concerned there because there isn't a sponsor out in that category that I could speak to per se to really kind of, adjust this. But if you're an entity and you're looking at your management supply factor, like East Montana Water System, if you feel like you want to put in a little bit more of a buffer, like El Paso Water, we probably need to have a conversation as to what you think that is. And so this is a preliminary first analysis of doing the calculation where conservatively I just took the largest volumes in each of those categories and felt like taking the largest volume is going to account for, the most folks and the highest water demand. But we have the flexibility to come in here and modify this on a entity by entity basis. And so we would need to have those conversations with those individuals representing those projects to get a feel for whether or not this is an appropriate buffer value, or do you want to increase, decrease your buffer value?
Jennifer, just to add on to David's question, what about the ones that are less than 1?
Yep. So give me just a second, unless Heather can speak to that off the top of her head. The board in our guidance did a great job kind of spelling out what it means when it's less than 1. So basically, less than 1 is going to have an unmet need. And there's a couple factors to be aware of. I took the strategies from our previous plan. Right now, Friesen Nichols and Carollo are heavily working on connecting with every sponsor and ensuring that what was in the previous plan is still okay. Does something need to come off? Does something new need to come on? Where we're really focused is entities that are having a water deficit. There's a need. Do the strategies in their previous plan, if they were to just carry them over, do they meet that need, or is there some deficit remaining? If there's a deficit remaining, then we either need to increase the volume in one of their existing strategies, or we need to ask what additional water management strategy needs to come on. So to give you a sense of what I was doing, I used the list of water management strategies in our previous plan. These values will be modified a bit once I have our final list of new water management strategies for each county for the 2026 plan. And I think what we'll see is where we've got less than 1, if that entity, for example, I know for a fact Fort Bliss and East Biggs has a water deficit in our 2026 plan. I will connect with an individual out there to figure out what other water management strategies need to come on to not just meet the need, but also build a buffer for this uncertainty that we're seeing in our population. So the 0.8 will become something different once we can fine tune that 2026 water management strategy list. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a first glance as what this tool does and how we're using it and how that's going to benefit, our plan.
You know, Jennifer, I would just say this, after 20 years of doing this with you guys, this is probably the most cogent table of information that I've seen. Very important. And the corollary of what you just talked about would be interesting to hear your comments about for those who have a management supply factor of some huge number. Like I see 6s and is there an
Yes.
8 there? Does
Yes.
do those need to be adjusted down a little bit?
That's a good question. And so obviously the first thing that that number tells me is that that entity doesn't have a water deficit for our 2026 plan. And so all the strategies that they decided to bring on, so if we look at Town of Anthony, all the strategies that they decided to bring on in the previous plan, plus their existing supply right now, is giving them an exorbitant amount of water, right? And so the question to the Town of Anthony is, do we need to slim your water portfolio down a bit? Now, I will tell the group we need to be careful with that because your strategies inside the regional water plan is the mechanism to be eligible for SWIFT funding. And we said when we were doing the unfeasible, non-feasible, analysis that we didn't want to preclude anyone from having access to SWIFT funding. So really maybe more the question is, do we bump your strategies out? Is it not a 2030, but maybe more a 2050 need? So some cleaning up will come with this table as we fine tune the information around which strategies are really staying in our 2026 plan and when do they come online and which ones are coming off of that previous list.
Do you see an optimal supply factor out there in the real world? What
like,
do you? Yeah, what would you say is a goal for us to work towards?
So the beauty of the management supply factor, in my opinion, is it's custom fit. And I think that's making it a grassroots tool to each entity instead of kind of a region-wide, average. And so I get more excited thinking that while we're doing the water management strategy work, we can have conversations that will help guide the technical consultants with what that management supply factor number really needs to be for that entity. And that may look very different to another entity. And I, maybe to answer your question or not, I like the flexibility of it being a custom fit tool.
Okay, thank you. Good work.
Yeah. So I was looking at the board's guidance.
You answered it exactly. It means that there's a deficit if it's less than. So then y'all will just look into that on how you want to address it. But also to answer your question, David, is it's kind of up to the WUG's appetite for risk, right? Obviously, a higher MSF means lower risk, and 1 meaning you're exactly meeting your needs with your supply. That's relatively high risk, right? So the higher the MSF, the lower the uncertainty. It's really up to the WUG, like what they think is appropriate for their community.
So what's interesting, yes, thank you, Heather. What's interesting when I'm looking through the guidelines to Heather's comment, WUGs that have a management supply factor less than 1 results from a WUG with an unmet need. But here's the interesting thing when I did the analysis. Not every single WUG in Region E is going to experience a need. In fact, I think Becky and I have counted just over a dozen WUGs are going to show a need at some point in our planning horizon between 2030 and 2080. So even though in some of these areas we have a management supply factor less than 1, the existing supply volume that they have, plus a strategy or 2, is still enough water for that entity because there is no need. And I think we need to be careful as well when we're looking at values less than 1. What I think might be helpful, and we've done this in other tables, is oftentimes we've put an asterisk right before the name of the WUG, and that asterisk tells us you have a water deficit projected somewhere inside 2030 and 2080. So that when you're looking at the cleaned version of this table, you can quickly identify, okay, Fort Bliss has an asterisk before its name. It has a projected need, and its management supply factor is going to be 1.6 or whatever, it ends up being. I think that would be helpful. So it's a work in progress, and it definitely has to be, modified to reflect the new list of water management strategies that are going to go into our 2026 plan. But I was trying to just guide the conversation around, like, what does this analysis look like? The tool is a powerful tool, in my opinion. I've never had to use it before. I don't think historically Region E has used it, but as we're, planning for uncertainty and we're seeing that more and more with our data sets, this is a nice way to make sure we're bringing on water management strategies that have a surplus of water to kind of account for those differences.
So Jennifer, what do you do with the factor? Then do you multiply that by your total demand and create a supply?
Yeah, so it then carries into our supply work, which is our chapter 5. So if we're going to, for example, use this for El Paso water, Scott, your board members and I, we've sat down and we've said, okay, these strategies will bring on X amount, but we want a buffer of 20,000. Okay, let's make strategy A increase by 3,000. Let's make strategy B increase by, and so on and so forth. We're kind of building in that buffer. So it flows into our water management strategy development.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions, just kind of something to think about. I'll continue to fine tune it as we get, new information around our strategies. I'll readjust our table. We'll probably see it again once or twice more. But I think from what I heard during our meeting last month, this was a desirable method of planning for uncertainty. So I'll just keep presenting the data as we clean it up at future meetings.
Okay. I think we're ready for item 9. There it is. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve the draft IPP chapters 9 and 10 and authorize Carollo to work with WUGS and/or the Texas Water Development Board on any final modifications.
Okay, great. These are kind of short chapters, so we'll move through this material quickly. But if you recall, Chapter 9 provides a survey of the level of implementation and identified impediments to the development of our previous recommended water management strategies found in our 2021 plan that have affected progress in meeting those projected water supply needs. In addition, this chapter also details this comparison of several components between the 2021 plan and our current plan. This chapter actually had 4 major sections, not 3, which is what I presented on at our previous meeting. So Heather was very kind to review these chapters as they're getting posted, and she's providing preliminary feedback back to my team. And there was a section in here that got missed, and I tried really hard to figure out how I missed it. I did a transition between WSP and Carollo, and I missed an email that went out by the board. And so her and her staff were kind to bring me up to speed, but there's this requirement that came from House Bill 807 during the 86th legislative session back in 2019. But since that bill was effective immediately, the board didn't have time to implement a rulemaking prior to the 2021 plan. So now this rulemaking has been completed back in June of 2020, and it's being fully captured within our 2026 plans. And that is this regional water planning areas progress in achieving economies of scale. So what we had in our previous plan was like a sentence or two that just did a plug knowing it was kind of coming. And now we have a section that is required, or a subsection that is required, that we had to build some content around. So I've drafted that content and thought it would be good to review that together with you. Heather has also reviewed the draft content, and it looks fine to her, meeting the board's requirements, as long as the planning group, also agrees. So like we often do inside our subsections, we start by kind of referencing the rules. So as a result of this statutory requirement, House Bill 807, the regions must include an assessment of the region's efforts to encourage cooperation between WUGs for the purpose of achieving economies of scale and incentivizing those water management strategies that benefit the entire region. The assessment of regionalization shall include the number of recommended water management strategies in the previously adopted and this current plan that serve more than one WUG. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second, because the Water Development Board is providing an Excel table for each technical consultant that's going to help support our work in trying to identify, are there any water management strategies inside Region E, previously or currently, that served more than one WUG. And based on that data that the board provided in Region E, there are no water management strategies, both previously or currently, that are going to supply to more than one WUG. So we have to kind of speak to it, but our analysis is going to look a little different because we don't have any of those WUGs that serve more than one, or strategies that serve more than one WUG. So based on that, in the second paragraph, I wrote, according to the Texas Water Development Board's data, there are currently no water management strategies in the previously adopted and or current regional water plan that serve more than one WUG. However, the Far West Texas Water Planning Group recognizes and encourages efforts related to the coordination of developing water management strategies between WUGs where it makes sense. This community-based development is liked by the planning group because it fosters the following key strategies. One, it ensures that water solutions are not only practical, but also culturally and socially appropriate. Two, it embraces the uniqueness of each community's resources and challenges, advocating for water solutions tailored to those specific needs. Three, active community participation instills a sense of ownership and responsibility towards water resources. And four, provides an emphasis on knowledge transfer and helps to empower local communities in becoming good stewards of their water resources. The Far West Texas Water Planning Group will continue to look for ways to develop shared water management strategies in this plan and for all future regional water plans. So that was the write-up that went in to complete that requirement in Chapter 9 that was missing. Comments, questions? Okay. In addition, during our September and October meetings, some feedback that came out of the review of those tables and chapters was to consider including a new column in several tables within our plan that will help provide kind of this crosswalk between which entities are experiencing shortages of water and what water management strategies came on to account or resolve those deficits. So in table 9-4, I've implemented a column here that lists out what water management strategies are tied to that entity or WUG that are going to take care of those water deficits that we saw in our previous plan. And my goal is to do the same thing for the final table, where we're going to list, all of the water management strategies that'll be in our draft plan right now. This was also something that both Davids recommended doing inside Chapter 4, where we show a needs table for the 2026 plan, to continue to have that crosswalk of, okay, we say we have a water shortage for entity X. what strategies are they thinking about bringing on to take care of that water shortage? So this went out for review by some of the voting members, and it'll be used in other places in the plan to address some of that good feedback that came back. And let's see. Okay, so that wraps up chapter 9. Chapter 10 is kind of this informative chapter that really talks about the group's commitment to public involvement and specific activities that ensured that the public was informed and involved in the planning process. In addition to 2 very small revisions, one was adding a name to one of the tables where we're accounting for all of our voting members. Another one was a sentence where we specifically name the representatives in our planning group that attend our interregional coordination meetings. I've also had the board do a preliminary review, and they've alerted me to a new requirement for this planning cycle, which was a summary of our rural outreach. So in red, you'll see that there's this rural outreach subsection 10.1.2. And I developed some language for rural outreach, which I can imagine this would be more detailed if you lived in a city, San Antonio, Dallas. But for our region, pretty much the majority of our entire region is rural. So in order just to plan and develop our regional water plans, the surveys, the phone calls, the emails, it's a constant effort of rural outreach. So again, I just, made comment about what the requirement was. And then I said the plan is largely supported by information provided by our WUGs based on numerous survey results. And I gave examples for where that information kind of pops up in our chapters. We have our population and water demand survey results for chapter 2, working with the WUGs to really iron out the existing supply volumes that had to go into the board's database. That's our chapter 3. We did this huge survey push for infeasible water management strategies to ensure that we didn't have anything in the plan that hadn't taken affirmative steps or wasn't meant to be there. That's our chapter 5. And then also chapter 9. And then our drought chapter, where we're having to connect with entities to ensure that the information in their drought contingency plans that they've updated, that they've provided to us is accurately reflected in the chapter. So there's just, dozens of examples in our plan where rural outreach is met just through the process of updating our regional water plan. But I just wanted to make you guys aware that this has gone in. It now meets, all the requirements found in chapter 10. And has gone through a preliminary review with the Water Development Board. So to kind of keep us moving, I think it would be okay, unless anyone thinks otherwise, that we go ahead and just approve these IPP chapters, and we'll move them off of our plate and focus on the other ones that remain.
If I may, Jennifer, I just saw a little technical typo on table 9. For the city and presidio strategies, it has the wrong county listed. So if we could just update that before.
Okay. What table is that?
9-1.
9-1.
Yeah, my apologies for not catching that sooner.
Nope, that's great. Thank you. I will double check that table.
Yeah, the last 2 items of the table.
Okay. Yeah, and there's still like highlighted yellow areas inside your draft chapters that I'll have to put in once we know when our public meeting has been set. There's language that says, the Far West Texas Water Planning Group held a public meeting on and a date. But for the most part, those details are very minimal and can be put in before we present the IPP as a whole. Now, keep in mind that we'll have to have that public meeting. The IPP will be a complete document, chapters 1 through 10 with the executive chapter. and then we'll have to approve the document as a whole. These kind of like, adoptions of chapters individually as we go is just allowing us to move it off our plate and focus on other chapters that need that complete overhaul update. And then before I come out for that IPP approval meeting, I'll have every chapter cleaned up. You'll have had it in your hands for a final review. Other small edits that need to be made, you can coordinate with me on, and we'll have that all ready to go for the IPP.
Thanks. I appreciate that explanation of the process.
Yeah, I don't want you feeling like this is the last time you're going to see your chapters. You'll see them all pulled together as a complete document for that last meeting.
Okay. Looks like we need a motion.
Is there a motion?
I can move that we approve chapters 9 and 10. This is John Kennedy.
I'll second
Alvin
that.
Nash,
John.
I second that.
Who seconded?
Looks like Dave Edsel. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, I think this is where I take a break for a minute, and we've got Dr. Fullerton coming on, and then I'll pick up after his agenda item.
Yep.
I don't think he's joined.
Motion passes. For the record.
Dr. Fullerton, are you on the call by any chance? Don't see him. And I don't have his phone number either. Is there a way to maybe go on to 12?
Yeah.
Or something? Oh, is he?
Let's see. He sent a message. It says, "I'm out of class. Can you forward me a link?" He sent this to Annette.
Oh. Okay. Is there a, okay, let me send it to him. Do you have his, I'm emailing it to him right now. Do you have his email address per chance?
Yes, it's Tom F. at UTEP.edu.
Okay.
That's pretty easy.
That's very easy. It's on its way. Oops. Did you get it?
I know. No numbers. That's a different.
I just emailed, so did I.
Mine has numbers. It's too ridiculous. It's different, but the default. Yeah, you would think was.
All's pretty common.
Yeah. So, I guess I was number 3.
Yeah.
Setup.
Yes, 3 other others.
And they must expect a lot because it's 0, 0, 3, not just 3. So whoever assigned that gave a lot of room.
Did you get it?
Let me see.
Yeah.
3 other others that work, but we all have to.
Yeah, I think we got Chase. Chase Farm.
Okay. Can we go on and do 11 while we're
Yeah.
waiting for him?
Oh.
That may be.
That-
Maybe.
Yes, yay. Okay.
Good.
Here he is. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Fullerton.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for coming.
Glad to do it. Glad I'm out of class.
Yeah. Okay, so this is item 10, discussion with Dr. Fullerton of UTEP regarding his draft population projections. Go ahead, Dr. Fullerton.
Can we get a camera on?
Okay, first of all, my camera isn't working. I don't know why. I've got the lens cap off, so it's something else besides the lens cap, which means it defies explanation by me. But let's see, what I did for these 6 counties was to, set up, small models to forecast population, model and forecast the population in each of the 6 counties. In terms of the population side of things, I've got equations for the number of resident births and the number of resident deaths. And then, they're based mainly on prior births and deaths. And then, it depends on which county, but things like per capita incomes. Just to account for the fact that incomes will affect, the fertility rates of women in those counties. And then, in terms of the other component of population growth, that's net migration, and that's impacted by labor market conditions in each of those counties. And so once I estimated those equations, the next step was to plug in, projected values for each of the independent variables for those models. The models aren't, they're all similar to each other, but they're not identical. There are, variations from county to county. But took the projections of these variables that drive, either natural increase or net migration, and plugged them into each of those equations to create forecast simulations. And that's what generated the forecasts that were shown in each of the spreadsheets that I provided to the Rio Grande Council of Governments, and it included all the components of population change there. So that's a summary of the steps I took to create those forecasts.
This is Scott Reinert, Dr. Fullerton. I'm looking at a table. Maybe Jennifer can help with this question also, but in 2030, there's about 100,000 difference in population between the UTEP study and Regional Water Planning Group. Is that, Jennifer, how could you explain that? Is that including areas outside of El Paso that El Paso Water is serving? And that's why it's different than Dr. Fullerton's number, but it's quite large in 2030.
So I am not the population projection expert, but my guess is that the Water Development Board's approach to those projections is utility-based boundaries. So to your point, Scott, the boundary of El Paso Water and what it serves. And I think the data coming from Dr. Fullerton has a slightly different approach. So we're going to see, differences there. It's not a direct apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, Scott, when you say, 2030, are you referring to El Paso County?
I'm not sure, Jennifer, if Dr. Fullerton has that table that we're looking at, table handout number 2.
Okay. Yeah, let me share my screen and see if I can't help that way. Okay. So give it just a minute to load. Okay, and then if I take our presentation and let me move our slides back to that agenda so we have it. Okay, so we first, as a group, just looked at the bar graph, Dr. Fullerton, where I simply took from your Excel sheet your totals for the region for every planning decade. And your data went out to 2075. We plan for 50 years. So I just held that 2075 value constant to 2080. And then I graphed the Water Development Board's data that the planning group has approved that includes revisions that we made to the board based on surveys. We surveyed all of the entities as to what they thought that, population value ought to be based on counts, connection counts, things like that. So, I mean, the first thing you're going to pick up on is the Water Development Board's approach is a utility-based planning using those utility boundaries. And this is basically just a graph showing orange bars representing your Excel sheet, blue bars representing the data that's gone into the regional water plan. And we kind of flip-flop. We're in the regional water plan, the blue bars are just a little bit higher than your projections up until about 2055, 2060, and then we flip. And in the 2060, 2070, and 2080 decades, your projections, are higher than what we have right now in our regional water plan. The handout too that they're talking about was just a table that I created where off of your Excel file, I took the value that you had for Brewster County in 2030 all the way out to 2080. Again, your 2075 value became my 2080 value, and just did this table between what does the regional water plan say that those projections are going to be by county, by planning decade versus your Excel sheet, so they can see by county that breakout. But then the bold values at the bottom is what got graphed on that bar graph.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies it a lot. Maybe let's see, a good place to start in terms of answering Mr. Reinert's question is to also include 2020 in that table, just see how we compare in terms of historical data. But that's obviously not something we can do during a Teams call.
Right. And it may be helpful if we continue our conversation outside of today, but Chapter 2 inside the regional water plan kind of details what the board's population projection methodology is. I've got a PDF document from the board on that. I can email that over to you. But when you started to mention, migration in and out of areas, births, deaths, that's definitely part of the methodology that the Water Development Board uses. I think the discrepancy maybe that we're seeing is that utility-based boundary difference. So the migration and the birth rates and the death rate is kind of spelled out in our Chapter 2, but our kind of boundary lines is not county-based or census-based, it's utility-based. And then just to remind the planning group members, you had sent us several months ago a wonderful letter that you had written speaking about what some of these economic, like these key economic and policy factors are in the region that maybe the Water Development Board's data didn't account for. And I brought that in, and that is inside our section 2.1.2. And it starts right here where your letter begins to spell out in this county, here's what we're expecting and why that increase, is anticipated to be a part of our, projection across the planning horizon. I brought that into our Chapter 2 so that we continue to build on this notion that, okay, we have this data set that we're supposed to be using by the Water Development Board to stay inside our regional water planning framework, but we agree that there's potential growth occurring in the region now and predicted to happen in the future that may not have been picked up, by the board's methodology. So it just will provide us a foundation to grow on during our next planning cycle.
That makes sense.
Yeah, when I look at that difference, Jennifer and Dr. Fullerton, I just think of El Paso serves outside of the geographic boundaries of the city limits, like Benton, the Hacienda, Paseo del Este, probably even give Jay Ornelas some water in Fayetteville. I don't know. But also, I think that's why, I think it's just a good understanding what his methodology is, his boundaries for his numbers versus Jennifer's boundaries for water service by El Paso Water. And I bet the differences in the other counties is not as much. See, they're much closer together. It's the blurry lines of our water service area versus geographic boundaries. But Dr. Fullerton's numbers, I think, with the smaller ones they're much closer. I think, but it's just I guess. Jennifer, your comment in the last meeting was that this population data from Dr. Fullerton would be an attachment to our report, but all our planning efforts, water supply strategies for our IPP, ultimately leading to our plan, approved state plan, would be based on the regional water planning group numbers, the blue bars.
Yes, I think where we're headed with what we've been seeing, kind of across the board and what I've been proposing is a great compromise. And what it's saying is there's uncertainty in both data sets. And, we've just talked about the obvious, which is we're probably not comparing apples to apples. We would have to figure all that out in order for this to be a true comparison. But regardless, those numbers are not that far apart from one another. And in order for us to just plan for the uncertainty around both data sets, we'll use the Water Development Board's tool with that management supply factor. We'll take the board's data like we have historically and use that, as part of the framework to us building our regional water plan that's required by the state. And we'll put Dr. Fullerton's data in as an appendix that says, hey, the region went out for a second opinion and they have done this additional study. And that additional study can be found in appendix, whatever, when we get to that point. And I've actually put discussion inside chapter 2, 5, and 7 that point to that study so that readers are made aware that this region did some additional work and contracted out for some additional data. And until we know, how to split those hairs, we're just going to plan conservatively by creating these water supply buffers.
I think that's a good explanation. The two different population sources or data provides a context for uncertainty, which leads to buffers to cover uncertainty.
Which I think is a good approach no matter what the scenario is. I think all regions perhaps should be planning for uncertainty because data's squishy, regardless.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of now recognizing that and embracing the uncertainty with the buffers. Before it was kind of like in 2080, El Paso is going to have exactly 1.1 million and 31 people, which is really kind of unrealistic, but we've been saying that for so long that we claim to know an exact number and we don't. It's because of uncertainty.
Scott, it's, I don't know that it's the absolute difference that's so important as the difference in trends. I mean, the state's got Brewster County losing people, whereas Dr. Fulton has us gaining people. And it's not by a small amount, it's 20%. Presidio is huge.
Presidio and Culver.
So, and certainly buffers are maybe a great solution. And I don't know if there is any better solution. I'm just saying that I think it deserves recognition that the trends are opposite. And that has huge implications for funding grants.
I think that's because he includes the migration component,
right,
and labor market. And those places are probably telling him about economic development that others aren't.
I understand that why there's a difference.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is,
no, I agree.
The difference in trends has huge implications for how the individual communities within the Far West Texas region deal with uncertainty. So.
Yeah, and just a quick plug around that. I joined a water development board's workshop yesterday with Heather, remind me, the Bureau of BEG. BEG.
Oh, yeah, the Bureau of Economic Geology.
Yes, and the Water Development Board is contracting out with BEG to explore this uncertainty around the population projections that are being used currently in this draft 2026 plan. And so I'm very excited because there's been a lot of discussion in this group, just like there's been across the state, that perhaps those projections weren't as accurate as communities felt they should have been. And so for the next plan, we're going to have a report that will fine tune what that projection methodology ought to be. And they walked through yesterday, just kind of a preliminary stakeholder meeting, what BEG has been tasked to do. And so just like our mining projections are now kind of more in line with the BEG's report, because they did an extensive, research on that across the state, our population projections are also going to go through that same kind of research. So I think there's going to be something coming out for the use of the next cycle that, to your point, maybe reflects these communities and these counties a little bit better.
Yeah, I've been coming to these meetings for more than 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complaint from the planning group to the state every time.
Yep.
Projections they're not adequate. The methodology's missing something.
Yep, I agree.
I'd like to thank Dr. Fullerton for joining us today and for having his input and letting us put it in as an appendix to our report.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
I'm glad to participate, and I've always thought that Region E is, needs more research than's been directed to it historically. And so this opportunity provided by the Rio Grande Council of Governments was one that I was really glad was extended to me. My only regret is I'm not there in Alpine with you. Last time I was in Alpine, in fact, I was there for a water conference as Sol Ross. So I'm envious that all of you are getting to enjoy, Alpine and the friendly environs out there while I've been in front of the chalkboard all day.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Fullerton. Are there any further questions for Dr. Fullerton on item 10? Okay, looks like we're ready for item 11. Consider, discuss, and review draft chapters 2, 7, and 8 of the 2026 Far West Texas Water Plan.
Okay. So we're going to go back and review some of the new language that came into our chapter 2 so that we can reference that appendix. At our July meeting, we reviewed in detail the draft chapter 2 that focuses on population and water demand projections and methodology. We pushed finalizing this chapter until we had Dr. Fullerton's results. And then it was discussed during our previous meeting that we would take that study and insert it as an appendix to our plan, and then make sure that we make reference of that appendix inside the appropriate chapters where that discussion warrants, alerting the reader to this second opinion. So I've gone back into our chapter 2. And I've done just that. There is a section here right above that 2.1.2 where I just said that's the section that we brought in his letter that really spells out, what growth is occurring in each of the counties that may have not been considered in those original population projections. So it's a nice place to kind of set up the reader. It just is this red small paragraph that says, lastly, the planning group. So above it, you'd have to go back and review the chapter, but I've spelled out the methodology that we were asked to use. I've spelled out who we surveyed, those survey responses that led to those revisions that got approved by the Water Development Board. All that now sits inside our final draft projections, or our final projections. So now I'm saying, lastly, the planning group sought out a second opinion and contracted with Dr. Fullerton, professor at the University of Texas in El Paso, to provide a report outlining key economic and policy factors within the region that can result in projected growth rates not being considered in the Water Development Board's approved population projections. See appendix whatever, right now it's highlighted. The Far West Texas Water Planning Group has considered how to address planning for uncertainty and how such planning could be included for the purposes of the 2026 Far West Texas Water Plan. See section 7.2. This is going to tie us into a section inside our chapter 7 where, new for this planning cycle, we have to plan for uncertainty and drought worse than the drought of record. So I got real excited because it's all starting to kind of line up. We have a call out in chapter 2 to an additional study that says, hey, we felt there was some uncertainty around our projections for population, which then leads to water demand. And also, you can find that study in this appendix. But we've also used a tool to help us plan this time around for this uncertainty. More discussion will be found in chapter 7. So it's starting to come together real nicely. That's all the updates I have for our chapter 2. And I think once we, review what's in there, we won't meet again until January. So if you're reviewing this chapter and you've got additional suggested changes or revisions, please connect with me. I'll continue to modify your chapter as you see fit. And then a final IPP chapter will come out in January for review and approval. Any comments? Okay. Flowing right into chapter 7, this chapter had a lot of great feedback from a lot of the voting members and members of our group. And so I'm going to walk through some of the changes that occurred in our chapter 7, which, just as a reminder, it's a big chapter. It's focused on drought. It was a new requirement 2 planning cycles ago. We've done some small updates in the last cycle. We've also continued to make those updates for this cycle, but then some new information came in that I'm excited about that continues to just enhance our regional water plan. So good feedback came back with StreamFlow. So thank you, Mr. Etzold, for your feedback around this StreamFlow indicators section. He provided some additional information regarding breaches in levees in the western end of the region, in addition to what was in our chapter with regard to Presidio County. So we've got some new information that came into that paragraph. I encourage you to go back and read that. In addition to that feedback, here in red, you have a new section that we had to come up with that in this planning cycle was part of the requirements, and it's focused on this uncertainty and a drought worse than the drought of record. So I'm going to just briefly kind of talk us through those requirements and then show you what I've developed as part of that section. And then, of course, the homework assignment is please go and review that draft chapter and connect with me for any kind of changes or new revisions that need to be made to your chapter. So the guidance says that the regional water planning groups may choose to consider scenarios and or quantitatively address uncertainty and droughts worse than the drought of record in their region. Now remember, we're still claiming that the drought of the 1950s is our drought of record. Although we have seen some really big droughts, 2011, 2022, it came back to kind of rival our 2011 drought. Still in the 50s, the length of time that we spent in that drought surpasses some of our other droughts. So that has been our benchmark. This guidance is around uncertainty and perhaps a drought that's worse than that drought of record. Some options we can use would be looking at any kind of like long range plan. So if we have an entity like El Paso Water who has a long range water plan, if they've got information in there around how they're planning for drought, you know, what kind of drought strategies they'll implement. Also, this management supply factor pops back up again. It's a great tool that the board is saying can be used in this section as well as a means for planning for uncertainty. So what we're required to do is create a new separate subsection where we summarize how the region is planning for uncertainty and the region's basis or policy for that uncertainty. These summaries, we're talking about going beyond that identified water need. So that management supply factor that we just discussed is a great way to plan for uncertainty that goes beyond these identified water needs. Some language that I kind of captured here is that the Far West Texas Water Planning Group considered how to address planning for uncertainty and how such planning could be included for the purpose of this 2026, that should say Far West Texas Water Plan, where we're going to look at studies that have been performed that can inform upon uncertainties in needs and water availability within the region. So those long-range studies where we recognize uncertainties both in the projections of the water demand and the population, and we've developed strategies that we can recommend that plan for these uncertainties and go beyond just meeting that water need. This comes into play when we use our management supply factor tool, and that the group supports the funding and the development of additional studies that perhaps identify other tools or other ways to be planning for drought worse than the drought of record. One thing I did note and comment in the new write-up for this section is that we have already identified potential emergency interconnects. This could be useful for informing on decisions of supply available should a drought worse than drought of record occur. So I was able to kind of point back to a section that we've already taken the time to develop. Okay, so in your draft chapter, this is just a snippet of what I'm proposing we use as part of meeting this requirement. One thing you should know is that this subsection has 3 parts that need to be addressed: a summary of how the region incorporated planning for uncertainty and the region's basis or policy for that inclusion, the measure to address uncertainty around the variability related to population and water demand. So obviously I've done a extensive write-up around, you know, those long-range plans, the management supply factor, you know, demand reductions achieved through the implementation of our drought contingency plans. There's multiple ways that we could come up with this approach. The second component is a summary of the key assumptions and a list of our WUGs and wholesale water providers to which these assumptions apply. And then lastly, that third component is a summary of additional types of measures and responses that are not part of the recommendations in our 2026 plan, but would likely be available to certain water providers and users in the event of a drought worse than drought of record. And the Water Development Board provides a table template to meet this third component. So I encourage you to go into your chapter. The table component is not sitting in the draft that got posted because it just was recently completed. But as soon as the meeting's over, I'll provide Peggy some updated chapters so you can have a chance to review and then provide feedback before our next meeting. But something that was of interest to me in this table template that will complete that third component is in this yellow highlighted area, I have brought over some really good feedback from Jeff Bennett and John Kennedy. And I think this strategy that they're talking about can sit nicely inside this table as something that the planning group is thinking about in future cycles. And that is a drought adaptation strategy that focuses on stream restoration, that connects annual flows to floodplains and increases the distributed natural storage of groundwater. There was a comment by Jeff, and I'll get into that in more detail here in a minute, that said, it would sure be nice to have some discussion around this because I know of entities in my area that are doing these watershed restoration projects. And as I was trying to complete, this third requirement from the board for this new subsection, I thought this is a perfect place to kind of showcase that the group is thinking about that and is doing it currently on a small scale in certain counties. So I've added that here. So let me just kind of come through part of the discussion that was put right above the table. Says, table 7-2 below lists these water user groups that are most likely associated with measures that may provide some additional water supply capacity in the event of a near-term drought worse than drought of record. The table is divided into two parts, and there's some key assumptions. So this first left kind of section is different than the right section. And I think what the board is capturing here is key assumptions, analyses, and strategies and projects that the region has already incorporated into their plan that go beyond just meeting those identified water needs. And so what I've done is they've listed, some suggestions here utilizing a MAG based on a DFC that's developed under drought conditions. I've brought in some of the methodology that we've used in El Paso County and others where we don't have groundwater conservation districts, therefore we don't have a MAG. And it was modeled by Dr. Hutchinson. And so I've brought that methodology in and I've placed the right check boxes by the entities that are using this approach currently. And then in addition to that, this management supply factor. So I've made sure to check all of the WUGs down the table that we think could use this management supply factor where we account for additional supplies beyond those that are met with just meeting the needs. So you can start to see a tie into, using that as a way of planning for uncertainty and how it's kind of impacting several other chapters. Then I brought in Jeff Bennett's language, and this is what he sent back to me. He said, it would be nice for the group to consider, so I just said, the Far West Texas Water Planning Group will consider as a future drought adaptation strategy, which is to focus on stream restoration that reconnects these annual flows to floodplains and increase this distributed natural storage of groundwater. These strategies have the added benefit of attenuating flood flows. Currently, there are several groups within Brewster County that are engaged in stream restoration, some at the watershed scale. These types of projects can be described as managed recharge. So forward thinking in our next plan, his recommendation was to provide some language around this, and I'll work with him and John Kennedy at that point to really kind of enhance this section and perhaps bring those strategies into our Chapter 5 water management strategy list. Okay, another section that the guidance requires for us to have in our 2026 plan is that planning groups need to identify any unnecessary or counterproductive drought response strategies. At a minimum, the planning group must review and summarize any efforts for neighboring communities that may confuse the public or impede drought response efforts For example, differences maybe in the implementation of outdoor watering restrictions between one neighboring DCP to the next. This doesn't exactly occur in our region because we are so rural and we've got communities that sit miles and miles and miles apart from one another. So I was having a really difficult time finding anything inside those drought contingency plans that would kind of conflict with one another. So what I did is I just wrote the first 2 paragraphs saying, hey, this new requirement came during the 5th cycle of planning by House Bill 807. Here's what we're supposed to do. And then what I wrote as a response to that is the Far West Texas Water Planning Area is comprised mainly of rural communities where neighboring communities are miles apart, if not often in separate counties. Fort Bliss and El Paso Water are probably our closest entities. They're about 5 miles apart from one another. However, Fort Bliss receives much of their water supply from El Paso Water, and their drought contingency plan pretty much aligns with the El Paso Water's drought contingency plan. This coordination between the 2 entities continues to respect the reduction of surface water allotments from that Rio Grande Federal Reclamation Project to water coming to El Paso Water, which obviously is what gets sold to Fort Bliss. So if neighboring DCPs were to cause confusion, the Far West Texas Water Planning Group thinks that it would be identified here first between these 2, just based on their proximity from one another. However, the planning group has not identified any unnecessary or counterproductive drought responses within the region, between neighboring communities or otherwise. The group does not feel that any of the DCPs within the region cause public confusion or impede any drought response efforts at this time. So now we've kind of fulfilled that new requirement for this plan. Okay, so we've talked a lot about additional feedback that came in. Jeff Bennett and John provided some great feedback. Some additional comments, I think, from John Kennedy was, if we could take some time to really focus and provide a good discussion around socioeconomic impacts of drought, especially on our rural communities, this could really deepen the understanding of water scarcity and its broad effect. Also, if we address future climate variability, it would underscore the need for adaptive water strategies. So there's some really good ideas here that we can either, if they're willing to write those sections up and hand them off to me, I can put them in our chapter, or we just build off of it in the next cycle. But it is exciting to see that we continue to have great participation with the group, and we've got new information coming into our plan, making our plan very unique to our situations in our counties for our region. So thank you everybody for your feedback. There's no comments or questions around Chapter 7. I will lightly touch on Chapter 8. Just as a reminder, Chapter 8 is our policy recommendation chapter, and it's where we house the designation of unique, ecologically unique stream segments. So I really need participation from the group to update this chapter. If there's anything in this chapter that you want to add to or take away, I'll just kind of wait for your feedback. One thing that I was able to do is kind of update some language around stormwater and flood planning. So in the last plan and in all of our historical plans, we've acknowledged as a planning group that stormwater and flood planning would be critical to our region. Well, I've put in here now some discussion around the flood planning process and the completion of that first round of flood planning for our region 14, which is the Upper Rio Grande. So for those of you that were involved in this flood planning process, instead of our Chapter 8 carrying language that said, at some point, this would really be helpful if we ever can get to it, I've now put in language that says we have, it's been completed. Here's some of the goals and key components that kind of came out of that. But I wasn't involved in this, and I would really like the help of those who were to kind of read this policy number 1 and provide some feedback. But I was able to update that based on the fact that we have now completed our first round of flood planning. There are other policy items that we list, so I encourage you to go in and look through that chapter. But at the end of the chapter, we talk heavily about our ecologically unique stream segments. I know we've got new members, and there's probably some questions around, what is this section? For your information, stream segment designation is to be supported. So if we recommend an ecologically unique stream segment, we have to support that submittal with a package that includes a physical description, maps, photographs, literature citations, data pertaining to it. It's not an easy task, but we have in our plan a handful of unique river and stream segments that we have designated ecologically unique. In addition to that, the planning group has come up with the 4 bullets down here at the bottom, that a quantitative assessment of how we're going to recommend these, water management strategies that could potentially affect these flows inside this ecologically unique section. Must consider the following criteria. So we have a layer going on top of what the board's requirements are. We take this very seriously. Just as a reminder, in previous plans, the Far West Texas Water Planning Group has recommended 3 stream segments that lie within the boundaries of state-managed properties, 4 within national park boundaries, and specified streams managed by the Texas Nature Conservancy and Texas Pecos Land Trust. And we have a figure in our chapter that just shows you which streams we have identified as ecologically unique. So we haven't in the previous plan added to this, but I recommend, going back in and reviewing chapter 8, and then connecting with myself or Becky if there's anything else that we need to consider, any other updates that need to be made. Questions before I hand this over to Frieza Nichols? They're going to provide us an update on the work that they've been doing around the collecting of data for these water management strategies. Okay, well, before we start and before Mr. Chairman gets to that agenda, I just want to thank the Frieza Nichols team for joining us today, and especially thank Danielle for being the one to come in and speak to us. She's kind of led the charge with the Frieza Nichols group, doing a roundup survey effort and collection of information for our Chapter 5 scope of work, which is the largest section of our plan. And so thank you for all the time and the support you've offered us. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Frieza Nichols.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm Danielle Fagan, a technical consultant with Frieza Nichols. As Jennifer previously mentioned, we're currently working on updating and evaluating the 2026 water management strategy list. And that's just to ensure that it's as accurate and responsive to local water supply needs as possible. And then, big picture, this also helps to expedite permitting and funding. Part of this process, a huge part of it, includes stakeholder outreach efforts, and that's what we're currently working on right now. We started survey outreach in August with sending emails. I think, Jennifer, you sent the initial round, and then Becky sent a follow-up round of emails. I'm currently working on the outreach side of things. Date, we have 7 surveys or email replies with information that we've gotten back, but we do still have 6 that are outstanding. And on the next slide, it just kind of summarizes that in a table of which ones we've received and which ones we still need to get from you guys. And then as far as the path forward, we're going to continue that phone call outreach. I'm thinking I'll probably send out a follow-up email to the outstanding WUGs as soon as we get out of this meeting while it's fresh in everyone's mind. And ultimately, the goal is to incorporate that survey data into the water management strategy analysis. And I do apologize. I know I'm still playing phone tag with a couple of you, and hopefully we can get in touch soon and get that information from you. That's all I have on my end of things. Pretty brief. John, Crystal, do you have anything else to add?
Danielle, if you could go back to that previous slide,
Yeah.
just for a second. You know, we totally get it. Understand that, you know, this is what a pain in the neck this is to some entities to keep getting these surveys and other stuff like that, and then have somebody call you up on the phone and you don't know who they are and you know what they're doing. But I would say for the members of the regional water planning group, for those, you know, you see the entities where we've not received the surveys back, we sure could use your help in encouraging these people to send back these surveys as soon as we can, because we want our plan to be as accurate as possible.
When do you have to have them?
Well,
Yesterday.
yeah, I'll let
I believe
Jennifer
August 19th was the date that I missed.
So I looked at my calendar yesterday as I was kind of thinking through, you know, next steps. What do we need to prepare for our January meeting? These surveys and the information in the survey really needs to make it back to us by the 21st of this month. So we're looking at giving you guys 2 more weeks. We're going to do as much effort as we can in collecting up until the 21st. And then at that point, we really have to switch gears and start the costing side of it. So if you aren't new to the planning process, you know that the board has a unified costing tool that we have to use, and we have to put in a ton of information that realistically costs each and every one of these strategies and gives us that breakdown of supply amount and the cost per acre foot and the annual cost. So we have so much more work that we need to do and be able to present January, February before we turn our plan in March. So we're saying 2 more weeks. We're going to do 2 more weeks of a survey push.
And that, do you go out to these? And Randy, have you seen this?
I don't think that's on.
Randy's not on anymore?
No, okay, Annette's not on.
Oh, she's not on. How about Randy?
Yeah.
Have you? Oh, I just want, you've seen this survey, Randy?
We might be able to coordinate with Peggy and Annette. I know we've done that historically, Peggy, where you help us, you know, where we've got gaps, then we kind of bring in the cog and they make phone calls. Sometimes the response there is a little bit better. So we'll definitely look into that, Dave. The other thing I wanted to comment on is my team is right now analyzing all of the needs that are showing up in our 2026 plan. And then if we literally carry over all the strategies from the last plan, for those that have a need, do those strategies take care of it? Yes or no? And where we have no's and we haven't heard back is really going to help us focus our time and attention as to who we need to be connecting with and the conversation that needs to be had, because the requirement is at a minimum we have to meet, you know, any kind of water need. So we're working on another tool that'll help guide our focus and our time and our discussions, but we do really need to wrap this up in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I know one of the major challenges that I've faced is updating contact information for people. So I don't know if there's any updated contact info that anyone can pass along to Jennifer or myself. Jennifer, I think your email is at the end of the presentation. I've done quite a bit of updating information, but there's still some that just kind of goes to a generic voicemail, and I'm not quite sure who I'm calling or if I'm actually, you know, reaching the right person. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Danielle, John, Crystal. others from Friesen Nichols to step in and really support Becky and I. And so we're going to coordinate in-house and come up with another plan, and then we'll be back out collecting information for a couple more weeks. And then, like I said, at a future meeting, I'll be able to tell the story entity by entity with regard to what their water need is, if they have one, if they don't, and what strategies they would like to see in the 2026 plan. So we're getting there. Okay. I think that takes us, yeah.
Go ahead, Jen. Item 13, report from Carollo on other regional water planning efforts.
All right, so thank you all for sticking with us. I know it's a little bit longer of a meeting, but that is how these meetings start to go when you're nearing that deadline. Other activities that we've been busy doing, in addition to the material that we're preparing for you guys, is obviously you've heard from Danielle. She's continuing to collect information around water management strategies. Then after that November 21st deadline, we're going to quickly turn our focus around to costing them. And then in addition to that, the Appendix 5A and 5B is the section in our plan that provides language around each of these strategies in detail. So if the city of Alpine plans on doing an expansion of their, wastewater treatment plant, well, inside Appendix 5B, you've got 2 or 3 paragraphs that talk about all the details of how that strategy is going to be developed and how much water supply comes online and when. So in tandem to the updating of our new list and the costing of that list, we've got to go in and revise all the text related to each of those strategies. In addition to that, I'm going to look at fine-tuning and finalizing the draft chapters that we talked about today. So if you have feedback, please get that in sooner rather than later. I would say by Christmas time, let's have all feedback in for our draft chapters 2, 7, and 8. And that just gives me an opportunity to come up with a clean final for a January meeting. At that time, we will also present the draft chapter 5 to include Appendix 5A and 5B and our draft chapter 6. So lots going on between now and when we meet with you guys next. And that really takes me to just this slide that kind of shows our meeting cadence. And obviously, we have agreed as of last meeting to take December off. I think we're okay to do that and give everybody a break and have family time around the holidays. But we will need to decide on when to meet in January. And then my contact information.
What do you recommend, Jennifer? What week's best for you?
So probably mid-January, it gets us all past the new year and kind of the new year holiday and travel. So either that second or third week in January.
I would say 3rd or 4th, please. First
3rd or
Tuesday.
4th?
Yeah.
Okay.
How about 3rd week? You want to send out a poll or?
16th? Do we like Tuesdays or Thursdays?
That second week?
Tuesdays or Thursdays, or the 3rd week?
3rd week? Yeah, we were
Third.
talking about 3rd week.
Thursday.
Thursdays? Third.
That's the date of what?
Teresa, Thursdays are better for you usually too, right? Teresa?
Would that be in the region or?
That would probably, well,
16.
the 16th, January 16th.
So how's everybody feel about the 16th of January?
That's the second week.
Yeah, well, I mean.
The
Oh,
23rd.
that's second week?
So.
That's,
Let's
yeah.
go to 3rd week.
23rd,
3rd week,
the
23rd.
23rd, Thursday, the 23rd.
Works for me.
23rd works for me.
Do you want to talk about the February date too?
Want to do February? Heather's just asking the February date too.
I don't know if I can figure that out right off the top of my head because that one, Heather, is going to require that public meeting, right? If we want to approve our IPP for the March 3rd, then that February meeting's got to have those public requirements.
The hearing, oh, the posting? 'Cause the
All of
hearing-
it.
The hearing is afterwards. After March 3rd, but the posting requirement, just give me 1 second to, I want to say it's 2 weeks, but let me pull up our checklist.
Yeah, so that's where I'm a little nervous because if we have to post material 2 weeks before the meeting,
Right.
my team has to have that meeting material ready to go. So it would be a late February meeting.
Yes. Just pulling up that checklist to double check.
So tentatively, maybe February 27th. Like that's the last Thursday of the month.
Well, so the adoption of the IPP requires 7 days posted. Yeah, it's 7 days. The final plan is 2 weeks.
So if we met on the 27th, material would have to be posted by the 20th.
Yes.
Does that give you enough time after the 27th? If there's any updates you have to make at the last minute?
Yep, that gives me all the time because we can't go outside of the 27th in February. So yeah, I'm voting to take that last Thursday of the month so that we have all the time we can squeeze out for all the requirements.
Is that a Thursday also?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I ask is all my other regions are also meeting the same couple times.
Oh, I'm
but,
sure.
But I am free the 27th, so.
Yeah. We're all trying to grab all the time we can.
We'll figure it out if I can't. We'll figure it out, but it's up to y'all.
Why don't we just plan on Thursday, the 23rd of January, and Thursday, the 23rd of February,
27th.
or 27th of February, yeah.
Is that a motion, Dave?
Sure.
Do it.
Okay, as so stated, I move.
I second.
Who seconded?
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Any discussion?
Location?
Probably El Paso.
Probably El Paso, yeah.
For both of them?
Do we need to have a remote location for the 27th? No?
I mean, we can do this from wherever, really.
Okay.
So
So
El
both of them.
Paso.
El Paso. Okay. No discussion? Doesn't sound like it.
No?
Okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
And
Opposed?
okay.
Missed that.
So that one wasn't unanimous. Okay.
So item 15.
Yes. We're on item 15. One of the Daves want to help us with item 15?
I move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We're carrying this one out to the very end. Motion passes to adjourn.
Adios.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good job, Jennifer. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Have a good week.
You too.
All right.